tools that are more in tune with what we would call the acceleration. So it's much more about these phase-out strategies, and it's about how to diffuse and scale up and still be inclusive. It's on sort of how do we prevent that we're not sort of creating a new lock-in. So if we all go to solar and wind, don't we sort of create another problem that if we run out of steel or silicium, that we suddenly have a problem there, or become dependent on something else. But it's also about this sort of institutional and maybe more financial aspects. So it's about shifting the whole economy and financial system and sort of the shake-up there. And of course it's interesting now the debate after the financial crisis and the divestment campaigns and the whole changes or debates on the role of banks and currency and so on. These are really fundamental changes in our social system. They create a lot of tension, but this is also where the transition starts to happen. So basically, I could honestly say that so far we didn't really achieve a transition. We weren't even working on a transition, we were preparing for a transition. In some areas, we are now confident enough to say we are past this tipping phase and we are really in a period of transition. But that's even far away from saying that we are comfortable that it is a sustainable transition. Maybe I'll briefly say that we're from Drift, we're coordinating two European projects and involved in a number of other ones. Urbis is also Mistra Urban Futures involved. There's a whole wave of research now emerging, and it's also part of the New Horizon program that's really on these kind of topics: transformative social innovation, on accelerating sustainability transitions. So it's on the process and the ambition of transitions, but it's also on the new roles and mechanisms of transition. The consensus that from a traditional way of organizing we cannot achieve a sufficient pace of sustainability transitions, that is now linked to also quite fundamental changes in funding structures, for example, or in how requirements for funding are formulated. Okay, so this I already addressed, and one of the puzzles, theoretical puzzles we're discussing a lot within Drift is this also has implications for the way we organize society. So we have these nation states, and we have national governments, and we have a representative democracy. And this is maybe the last domain that we didn't enter, but it might be the most crucial one, that ultimately we are going towards a situation where we have a much more diverse situation of how society is organized. And historically we have had all these theoretical debates on anarchist models, on self-organization, and this is an open question for us. We see all this movement and we see this diversity, but what will be sort of the alternatives? Just raising the issue. So last 5 or 6 minutes. It also has implications for science. So transitions themselves are very strange concepts. So they are, in a sense, unscientific because they are not there. They are very subjective. We are part of it. So how can you study it? You can not falsify them in a classical sense. And then you can come up with all these nice terms: interparadigmatic, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary. Sure, but from a disciplinary mode 1 science point of view, it's questionable to study transitions other than historical transitions. It's like a descriptive theory. that structures a historical narrative. That's sort of, and also in the field of transition studies, that's more or less a dominant opinion that becoming engaged in emerging transitions, of which you cannot even say that they are a transition, and then try to presume that you can intervene in some kind of way to make them more sustainable. That's stretching the understanding of science. On the other hand, of course, our argument is that we're trying to come up with a new type of science, which has its roots in already in the 90s, in the whole debate about post-normal science, uncertainties, integrated assessment, all sorts of participatory action science, already going back to the 60s and 70s. And as I tried to explain, to combine sort of the scientific methods, scientific knowledge, and a scientific way of thinking, of structuring arguments, combine that with, it's not only active, but with experimentation in practice. That has a lot of advantages, because you get validation of your analysis through sort of interaction with stakeholders, creating sort of a legit and validated analysis of a problem or a historical narrative, but also helping practice further. It's an environment where we can test out hypotheses on how transitions come about and are influenced. So we use these settings, these experiments, these transition arenas as laboratories almost. So we see ourselves really as part of sort of the XO, as part of this collective experimental journey of sustainable development. And that creates all sorts of tensions, because for one, being embedded in practical innovation processes makes it hard to publish a lot of papers. On the other hand, if you organize these divisions of labor in a group, then it can have advantages on all sides. We have more information than we can ever put in papers. There's also a lack of time, but there's also, there's just too much. While at our sociological department, they are looking for topics. They have all the time, but they're looking for topics. So we are now discussing with them, there should be some kind of collaboration being possible. For us, and that's what is happening here, and it's all over the world, there's also an emerging body of literature about this, transformative universities. They start really from sort of having a sustainability office, sustainability department, introducing some sustainability in the catering or doing something in the electricity. But the real impact, of course, like with companies, is to sort of reform and rethink basically the core mission and how you operate. I won't say business model, but the science model in terms of the universities. We see increasingly successful examples of that, but there's no sort of blueprint. Every organization, every company, every governmental body has to go through their own process of learning and experimentation. And so what is happening in universities is happening in governmental bodies, is happening in businesses as well. I think I want to leave it there. My main message, and I hope I was able to convey that, is that this way of thinking about transitions, it's sort of a socio-scientific arena. So around this concept of sustainability transitions, we try to bring together all sorts of academic and social debates. And if I say we, I mean we at Drift, but the transition community at large, I think. And even broader, you could say this is happening throughout societies. So we're only trying from a drift perspective to identify and to articulate what is already emerging and give it a language. The hopeful thing for me is that these transitions are happening whether we want them or not. So for me, they mainly express the possibility for larger scale breakthroughs. So I don't share the pessimism that we are now on the still on the negative scenario of the growth of Rome, because I see the potential of exponential growth in all the sustainability alternatives that are out there. If you look at renewable technologies, that's evident. If you look at the social economy, what's happening with complementary currencies, that's the same. If you see what's happening in terms of our food patterns and how we produce food and the debate around it, while at the same time our economies are slowing down, our demographic growth is slowing down, we start to become aware of it, and we can expect these surprises. So there's going to be more floodings of the Balkan, there's going to be more crises, there's going to be more breakthroughs, there's going to be more divestment campaigns. We can expect these surprises, and they create these windows of opportunity. And I think it's our responsibility as a sort of community in sustainability to look for these patterns, but also to empower others to seize this momentum. Hopefully in this way also escaping our own lock-ins. Thank you very much. Did I leave some time or?
Perfect timing. So if there is one question, short one, while I'll take this one with my presentation, because we will have time for discussion and questions after the coffee. So if you have something that you want to, I just put it there, that you want to, some clarification or something that you
It was
think.
very clear.
It was very clear, and it was.
But
You have to
it's
digest it for
it's disappointing if you all agree, of course. That,
One question out of curiosity, and I'm fully aware of that it's an impossible question, but could you reflect a bit on time frames of transition processes?
yes.
I mean, decades is a short time, and obviously it's different for different. But
Yeah,
and you must have thought about it.
It's multi-layered, but sort of common answer would be that at the level of the social system, like education or energy or mobility, you would think of 1 or 2 generations. So it's 20, 30, 40, 50 years maybe even. But this is happening in the context of, for example, the Industrial Revolution or the historical transition that already started in the 1850s, you could even say. So this was a transition period of 150 years. If you zoom in even more, then you can have faster paced transitions. So at the level of an industry cluster, you can see transitions 10, 15 years. Or at the level of the city, for example, it can be 1 or 2 decades. Often people focus on this period of acceleration, and that's a relatively short period. So the Energiewende in Germany, that's now only 2.5 years ago that they took this decision, and it's gone from 15% to 75% in 3-4 years. So that's a huge jump, and people see that, but it originated already early 90s. So to explain this short disruptive period of growth, is that you need to take a much larger time frame. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much so far. And I will give a very short presentation about our project within Mr. of the Future, and then we will take coffee, and I think you're ready for coffee. So I will be very short. So this has been, this is one of the biggest projects in Mr. of the Future, and besides Chalmers. There. carriers and some other bigger project in Mr. of the Future. And it has been going on. It started already before Mr. of the Future, this collaboration, transdisciplinary collaboration. But the focus has been then well-being in sustainable cities. And the organization is very much also from within academy and from outside academy. And it's on project leaders, but also on subject project leaders. And the whole transition goal is about this, of course. How can we manage this transition towards being able to make about 10 billion people happy on this planet? And what we see very much is that it is a transition. It is not something that will just continue. It is something that has to be changed. Almost in the same way as from agricultural society to the industrial society, from low intensity, low efficiency, low material growth into something that was growing very quickly with a lot of materials going from, tape making waste through the society into something new, sustainable, that is so much more efficient, but still high intensity in order to supply so many people with the services that we